We have another playable character for you today. Someone that can truly think for themselves, but more importantly, someone that's actually taking action. Someone that's actually doing something in this world, as he says, to create the better world that he wants to see, to actually create the system and be a part of the new system. The legacy fiat system is dying. Completely, the Titanic sinking slowly, slipping under the waves. This new equity-based system, the fairest and most just system we've ever seen, Bitcoin, is being built by people like Dambe. And he's someone that I had the privilege to meet a few months ago in Miami. Very excited to see him very soon at Pacific Bitcoin, and depending on when you're watching this. But one of the best events out there, along with Miami. So many great Bitcoin events, and they're one of the best ways to meet people like this, to meet people like Dambe. People are actually doing something in society, actually making change for my children, for his children, future children, and his the kids I might have, or the kids you might have, or your grandchildren, or the people around you, your nephews and nieces, your grandkids. This is someone you want on your side, in your ring. I hope you enjoy this and see exactly what kind of person, the personification of a Bitcoiner, that is Dambe. Someone who puts his life on the line as a firefighter as well, helping people not only financially, but also saving them. And he does this in every way, and it is truly a real example of what a Bitcoiner is and what they do. Hope you enjoy Dambe. Mr. Dambe, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time. I forgot to record already some of our intro, which would have been nice to have. But thank you so much for everything you do, brother, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, dude. Happy we got to connect. And I know we talked about jumping on back during Bitcoin Miami. Yeah. So happy we got to jump on and excited to be on.
Yeah, I always tell everybody in the beginning, I always clip like a little intro and outro at the end, and I always talk about being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. And obviously those are words that are tossed around a lot in the Bitcoin community. But when you think of that, which I haven't really asked anyone this yet, I just kind of imply it. But when you think of that being a playable character versus a non-playable character, what goes through your head when you see people throw that around the Bitcoin community? Like what do you think of in that world of what makes people playable and what makes people non-playable?
Yeah, and when we say playable, you're talking like Steve Buscemi could play me or something like that, or like
Yeah,
like,
this is why
give me the rundown
because from now on. Yeah, so people that can, to me, it's people who can think. So like if you're a playable character, you're someone who's a critical thinker. You can, you're trying to find objective truth. And you can kind of see, the fog of war is always all around us, really, in life, and who is trying to find the signal within the noise, where you have a lot of non-playable characters who they're just kind of droning on and on. They just take every story. They don't use any of their higher faculties. They're just taking whatever's fed to them. They're just taking it. And they're just like, yeah. And they're just regurgitating, the state's propaganda. They're regurgitating whatever their teacher told them. There's no critical, there's not a lot of brain activity going on up here. So that's why, to me, the people I interview, the people we talk to, obviously in this world, you want to find playable characters, people that I believe are using their head, using their, God's highest form of creation. We're using that gift, our brain. So what do you think about, I guess, in those terms of maybe some of the ways that you usually go through media, or how are you sifting through information to kind of discern what is true or what isn't?
Yeah, I think well, first, thanks for the compliment. I'm gonna take that as a compliment, and I think it's a great compliment to be labeled a critical thinker. I think looking back at my life, I've tried to critically think in certain areas, and then in other areas, I've been just robotic, part of the machine. Another thing is based on my job, which is a firefighter. There's a lot of controls that do not free up. I was talking about this with the blue collar Bitcoin guys, that our job, you have to be a critical thinker, but in other areas, it makes you kind of a very robotic, like systematic checking individual that has to, right? Because our thing is making an unsafe situation as safe as possible. So you can imagine, right? Like firefighting isn't always, compatible with like the artistic free thinker who's challenging things all the time.
Different side of the brain. Yeah.
But I've always tried to think about things, question things, My wife really challenged me to be more of a critical thinker, and she is definitely one of those. And I think Bitcoin is another catalyst that forces you to critically think, because as you unpack Bitcoin and learn about the fundamentals within that system is a challenge to another system. And so you have to kind of, in order to understand and learn it, you have to question certain things around legacy finance. You have to question systematic controls and understand those. So that's been a big piece. And as far as like where I am, just, as much as I think I'm a critical thinker, I always have to stop and really question things, because I still am very much a cog in the machine on certain issues. And I really strive now. It took me a long time to mature. You
Hmm.
like
Oh yeah,
being a
being a
younger
guy.
dude. Oh, dude, we're some of the dumbest, like most programmed clowns in the world. Young dudes, and I was there, and it took me a long
Hmm.
time to mature, question things, figure out why. Reading helps because a lot of writers question stuff. So I'd say it's a bunch of things, and again, Bitcoin has a lot of people that fall into that category.
Yeah, I love you said that, and it makes me think of the just in the biblical sense of worrying about the log in your own eye. Like we're always so worried about the splinter in someone else's eye, and we don't notice the log in our own eye. And the same can be said with cognitive dissonance, where I know like BJ, Dichter always talks about cognitive dissonance. I know Scott Adams talks about it a lot, and Nolan Bowerley does too. But it's you are most susceptible to cognitive dissonance yourself. So you kind of just alluded to that, like, that humility of like understanding like, hey, I'm just as much part of the system, that cog in that system. We can all be very manipulated. We can all be mind controlled, whatever it is. And I think that's a really important thing to really note, like think about yourself. Because a lot of us, especially Bitcoiners, we tend to think like, oh, we're kind of impervious to that. Like we got it all figured out. And that's when you start to slip. And that's when you start to kind of go backwards. So that leads me to, what is it that maybe in your job even, or kind of throughout your life, helped you kind of, one, get to Bitcoin, I guess, but like, what are some of the things you've learned in a way? And it could be even just recently, it could be stuff like you're doing stuff with, Foss and Joe Calasari and you're like people that you're seeing, like, people that we look to as mentors, people, guys that have been doing this stuff for a long time, are kind of seeing the playing field. Or maybe it was firefighting. What are things that have kind of triggered some of those different like aha moments over the last maybe 5 or 10 years? Where you're like, huh, man, I was thinking about this all wrong, or oh, I didn't think of it that way, or wow, like that's what are some of those moments maybe that have kind of hit you over the last few years?
Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise, because the algorithms hate truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have discoveries and realizations in different areas, and I've had different events in my life have kind of led me to question different things. I mean, we can jump into this. This could take the whole episode, right?
Maybe a
I was
multi-part
I was
episode.
Exactly. I was raised in Catholic school, raised Catholic, and so there's huge avenues there about questioning the system, and like you start thinking like, all right, and legacy education, um, doing things on the union front, and seeing the way that another interesting learning experience for me was doing something that I was intimately familiar with, and then reading about it in the media, and I'm sure BJ can relate to that. That's
Yeah.
such an eye-opening experience, the way that the media works, and the fact that if you, Brandon, wanted to do an article on me on something I was doing with good intent, where you said, "Hey, I want to put this person in a good light and positively shine a light on the work they're doing, you're only going to get 50% accuracy at best of what I'm doing. There's still going to be things that you don't quite capture. And that's if you invest a ton of time to like learning and understanding it. If you just want to do a quick little clickbait piece, take that down to like 0 to 1%. And what's interesting is anyone who's been in the media, not that I've been in the media, but I've done some things that were covered sometimes with my work. When you see that, it's eye-opening, because you know, media is a major piece of consumption for the average everyday person. And it really opens your eyes to like, oh my gosh. I read a great book called Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. And encourage anyone to read this book. He did a lot of the campaigns for, I forget which company he did, but he also used to do campaigns. You remember that book that came out called, I'm gonna forget this. His name was Tucker Max, and it was like this, like
like 15 years ago. Yep.
The frat bro book.
Frat bro
He talks
stories.
about how. Yeah, he talks in his book about how he generated controversy by actually doing hit pieces on the client that he was working for. And everything was this kind of like orchestrated dance, and how he took advantage of the fact that modern day journalism lacks credible sources and time. And these writers, some of them not even at their fault, are expected to turn over story after story really quickly without digging in. So it's an interesting read. That's just one area. I know I'm kind of going on, and we can go in a lot of spaces with Bitcoin, though. You know, looking specifically at Bitcoin, I learned about Bitcoin, ironically, don't kill me here, at a conference in 2017. I think it was late 2016, 2017. And it was actually, I want to say it was an Ethereum conference. Now, at that time, those days, there was a lot of intermingling with Bitcoin and different, you know, projects. And I had no information. I was just like working this event, and I talked to a bunch of people and soaked up a ton of different education there, being there for like 14 hours. And then from there, I found Bitcoin, you know, and realized quickly that that was like the original, and was very passively involved, but only more actively became involved as my kind of union career came to an end, and learning more about Bitcoin and becoming, you know, getting to that point where I'm like, hey, I have to be an active participant here. Like, and so that was a key moment in challenging different things. And how do I become an active participant? And how do I move Bitcoin forward, not for my benefit, but for the people that have yet to find it, and just let them see what I see. I may be wrong, I may be right. Who knows? It's not about that. It's about passing along the knowledge that I have to go, hey, I have experience in this area, especially with workers, unions, things like that, pensions. And here's the way I see this thing being pivotal and where I see it fitting in. All I can do is show you that thing. I'm just one person. There's, you know, I may be completely off or dead spot on, but at least please take a look at the things that I've learned to make the decision for yourself.
Well, yeah, and again, I wrote a couple of things down, like that book. Someone was just talking about that book the other day, so I have it somewhere, and I haven't read it yet, so shame on me. But it had a couple of things I wrote down, but I want to touch on this quick, which is where is like as you know, I'm preaching to the choir, but many of these, you know, whether it's endowments or it's pensions or, you know, so many of these different, you know, huge, you know, Leviathan programs that are being run by people that really just frankly don't have much experience. Most, if not all of them, are bankrupt or very underfunded, you know, stuff like that. Your world, I would love you to go into a little bit of like what you're seeing and what you're dealing with, because like that's a fact, right? Like the numbers are the numbers. These things are either like going bankrupt or underfunded, whatever. And then you're introducing this completely new system. And you just touched on this a little bit ago. So it's kind of bringing this all together. It's a completely new system. And it's like, you know, Jeff Booth always says, you can't fix the current reality from the current system. Like we have to go to a new system because we have to get rid of this debt-based system we're in. So what kind of conversations, what kind of reactions, I guess it's a reaction. What kind of reactions are you getting from people when you're introducing this completely new thing to them? Because you're telling them, hey, look, you agree this thing is falling apart, right? Like, I have an answer over here. What does this like chasm look like? Like, what is this reaction with people, and what are you seeing as you're doing this and going through the Nakamoto portfolio? You can touch on that, obviously, what you guys are doing, introducing people to stuff like this. How are their brains exploding? Are they people like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense? Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different reactions. Pensions are massive funds that are entrenched in different, in a built system. They are entrenched very much in the way that they're built. They're not built to pivot into new things, take a lot of risks. Ironically, as I've learned so much from like Greg Foss, is ironically, there's a lot of funds right now in that mindset of, we're not going to take on risk. They are taking on the largest risk. And the risk that every pension fund faces inevitably is not being able to keep pace with the liabilities that they are committed to. Very simply put, me and you start a retirement fund for 100 of our friends and family, and we base it around certain, known variables, and those variables start to change, whether it's cost of living, whether it's how long we expect people to live, whether it's how many people enter the system or leave the system. And that's on a very basic level. As it gets more complex, you have more pressure on those systems. And so a lot of these pension funds, there are funds right now that are being actively bailed out it's not even making front page news. And this is because part of the American Rescue Act included, I want to say, up to $80 billion pre-approved of pension specific money. And that money is getting doled out, where normally you would see headlines like, this pension recently collapsed. And a lot of these are in the private sector, not as much in the public sector, but it's all a matter of time. We had a pension fund in our show, the Wisconsin Retirement System. They're a very healthy pension fund, and they have close to 100% funding. They're also a young pension fund. Yeah. And younger pension funds don't have the traumas. And, if you can imagine a pension fund that's been around for 80 years, and every recession that happens, they get burned in some form. And maybe in that recession, the books, the major, everything's balanced on the backs of workers sometimes. And there's some losses there, and they're trying to catch up. But then when you go to catch up after you've been burned, you're a little more hesitant, right? You take some more systematic safety things. So you're trying to keep up with this high demand, and you can't afford to take the risk that they might be able to take on like Wall Street, et cetera. So as your pension fund exists longer, you have more challenges. It's harder to keep up. Well, I see Bitcoin right now as an amazing opportunity on all fronts. We talk about how there's many different assets to Bitcoin, but facets. Let's talk about Bitcoin as an asset. Here's something that has a tremendous amount of promise. And for those of us who know, it's so obvious. And yet, a lot of pension funds, because they view it as risky, because going back to the media has, put some very inaccurate information out there on Bitcoin. And I will say, whoever's doing this has done it successfully well, because if you talk to people that don't know, the same punchlines come out time and time, right? Well, yeah, Bitcoin is just for criminals to embezzle money. Hey, Bitcoin, that thing crashed from like 70,000 to like 10,000. Bitcoin, like, didn't a bunch of people lose billions of dollars in FTX? And we hear these, and it's comical because the legacy system, all these complaints, times it by 10,000, and that's the problems you have in the legacy system. Like, you want to talk about fraud, embezzlements, or problems in the legacy system. There's no shortage, but that's not news. Yep. And so you get a lot of challenges with the pension systems, and all you can do is try to stay persistent, continue to show them the value. And, again, I always say, if there's no solution to the problem, you have to at least listen to my solution. You can dismiss it, but like, you can't sit there if it's a particular pension fund, not one of the healthy ones, even though one might argue in time, they're still going to suffer the same challenges of other funds. But if you're sitting there underfunded and you've tried everything and you're looking at big problems and getting bailed out, you have to at least look at Bitcoin, in my opinion.
Yeah. Is it, so you mentioned, some of the different pensions and stuff like that. What is it, like the private side, city, states, like the American, rescue plan? Is it what kind of pensions are they bailing out? Is it kind of like, hey, whoever's running and asking, like the PPP stuff? Like what is that looking like?
Yeah, so they're bailing out. You can just look up in the mainstream media, you'll see small coverage on this at the very local level. There's an application for pensions in crisis, and you can find this by looking up the Pension Guarantee Corporation. I'll find you this for the.
I'll put in the notes.
It's called the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, and if you go on their website, which Foss was telling me they too are bankrupt, or at one point were bankrupt, but they got a fresh boost of liquidity from
all of
American
our funds.
Rescue Act.
Beautiful.
Yeah, all the money that was printed. But again, there's applications in real time right now that are pending, and you can find these, you can see these. Some of these vary from like small private pensions, some of them are public. Again, the private pensions are ones that are pretty much being phased out at this time and kind of are on the end days. But again, what I do want to say and point out is we see these things, it's for a good cause. It's just the wrong, like these bailouts, printing a bunch of money to bail out pensions and then get the money into hands of workers that were promised this pension. Like, I'm a huge advocate for the workers who were promised a pension. I always say this, you can argue whether a pension should be or shouldn't be, but I think something that everyone would agree on is that if I'm an employer and I go, hey, Brandon, let me talk to you. I know you're just finishing up in hockey and you're looking for a place to work. You're a talented individual. You have a lot of talent and skill. I want you to come work for me, whether it's a private company, whether it's a public service. And I want you to commit 30 years of your career to building whatever it is that I'm doing. Maybe it's my city, maybe it's my business. And in exchange, Brandon, I'm going to give you this at the end of your 30 years. You can argue whether that was right or wrong to give to give it to that person. I don't think can't be argued by any person logically is that deal, it's okay for that to be violated. 20 years, 25 100%. Years, 30 years through. I have a big issue with that. And sometimes people get worked up on pensions, but someone that traded their whole, time and career to help build whatever it is someone else is building. I get it that I may treat you very well, give you great benefits, but that was the deal when we shook hands. No one had to shake hands on that. No one had to offer that. So, one of the things I want to make clear, and I always make clear, is that the thing that I look at is how it's being done, and I would like to see the people that made that deal not rely on taxpayers and, other bailout mechanisms. I'd rather see them take bold steps to secure the future of that deal and have it supported like that. And that's where I see Bitcoin being able to come in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like you said, it's people can argue about should we have pensions or not, whatever. But we're in this situation. There are pensions that exist. There's a lot of problems. So what do we do now? And those promises that were made, we have to figure out how to do that. And that's where looking at these new solutions, it's hard. I mean, this fiat system, this debt-based system, that's why all these things are imploding. And I think that's where a lot of these problems, it's inevitable they're going to implode, or they're running their course, and the iceberg's about to flip, and the system's about to just completely be rearranged, or the chairs in the Titanic are being rearranged as it's sinking. I guess it's to make a couple analogies come together, but you have to deal with it. And I think that's where it makes me think of too. Have you read Who Stole My Pension by Kiyosaki and Ted Siddell? They wrote a couple years ago. They wrote it, and they talk about the pension benefit plan guarantee corporation. and all that. But anyway, they wrote in like 2019, I want to say, but it was about their thing was like, hey, the whole system's coming down because of the pensions. Their thing was like the pensions, and Ed Seidel was an attorney, and he goes in and he sues all these. I don't know what he must be suing the pensions, or like he audits. He's like an auditor, and he goes in and he's done all kinds of work on the East Coast, I believe, generally. But he talks about California, stuff like that a lot, and they talk about that. But very fascinating because they go through the defined benefit side versus the defined contribution side. So if you haven't read that, or if anyone listening hasn't read that, it's a great book to kind of go through. And then as they read that, then they can dive into, again, some of the stuff you guys are doing, the Nakamoto portfolio, and some real people on the ground, like, again, you and Joe, Greg Foss, doing that, and kind of really going through on a case by case basis and looking at what people are doing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I got to read that, and it just makes me think of, again, we had the Wisconsin retirement system on the show on the Nakamoto Gauntlet, where we take the portfolio, we play around with Bitcoin and see how it could impact a fund. Not part of, I saw in the news, Minneapolis, another great hockey town right there, right?
I don't want to admit it, I'm a Michigan guy, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they didn't join the Wisconsin retirement system way back, and they recently were on the verge of bankruptcy. And you mentioned audits, and they figured out a plan. They got through it. The way they did it is they're going to make a sales tax, which sucks because you have people who are struggling with inflation, and they go, all right, here's an extra tax to backstop us not being able to keep up with the liabilities. I don't think that that's great. But it's interesting, when the auditor came in, these numbers that we see where pensions say we're funded at this level, if you put the clamps down and go, okay, fine, we have to actually provide money, auditors, those are always usually lower than you would expect. So when it's all nice and dandy and you can go, well, there's a lot of variables and here's our estimated amount, if you actually audit some of these, and when these funds do go under, it's much lower. Their needs and the situation is usually much worse than was projected, because the numbers they don't really matter if you're still making your payments. But when it comes time for me saying, okay, now we need the taxpayer to backstop this fund and pay it, the auditors come in and go, well, hey, that generous number you had on the value of this or this, like, it's time to get real with all these numbers. And they often come down, they come in lower. So
what's the biggest thing you've learned from, you briefly touched on something, I think with Greg earlier, but what's the biggest thing you've learned from, Joe, Greg, kind of going through some of these things? What's kind of some epiphanies or a big golden nugget you kind of had, or you're like, oh, wow, I didn't think of it this way, or dang, wow, that you really think of it, in an interesting way I never thought of it before. Is there anything kind of stands out in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I've learned about finance through the Bitcoin community, through Bitcoiners like Foss and Joe Carlasari. I mean, we're so blessed. That's a hidden benefit of Bitcoin that I tell people all the time, is the community and the ability to access the community and get like some of these amazing, unbelievably talented individuals who are able to evaluate and critically think and provide solid, reliable information. It's nuts. One of the biggest takeaways I've kind of learned through our show, our first guest we had, Elliot, from the ETF fund he has, and I gotta get the name of that, Evolve ETFs. We talked about it through Foss, that there's all these, as much as I want pensions to buy Bitcoin, they don't have the infrastructure necessarily to properly evaluate, learn, and understand Bitcoin. Let me just bring this as an example. If you were my family member and we're back home for Thanksgiving, we've learned that I can't just be like, Brandon, just buy Bitcoin and like have fun, good luck. Yeah. Right. You're gonna come back to me in 2 months and you're gonna be like, so I did what you said, I bought the Bitcoin, and then I also bought like this other coin and I held it here, but like, dude, I lost this, and like someone actually messaged me and said, right, you can't. Yes. It's a lot more than that. Well, imagine the challenges for a pension fund. I also can't go to a pension fund and say, here, just buy Bitcoin, good luck. They don't have within their infrastructure people that are dedicated to doing the legwork needed to responsibly buy and hold Bitcoin and learn about it and understand it. That's why
That's
the
fascinating.
spot the spot ETFs are so significant, because they offer a vehicle, if approved, for institutions to not have to do that legwork, to trust another company. Now that we know, if time has taught us anything in Bitcoin, the minute you trust a third party, you are just setting the timer for failure. That timer may be a week, it may be a month, it may be 10 years, 100 years. One of the greatest things about Bitcoin is you can take self-custody, and there is no one to trust. There's no timer going off saying your situation's about to implode at this time. I don't know if a firm like BlackRock or Fidelity is going to do a good job or not. I just know that, we still need the education to take place within pensions to teach them about what they're doing and why it matters and what options are available. And so I'm committed to doing that. And my biggest thing I've learned is I can't just tell pensions to, get Bitcoin. I have to be actively involved in building out models for them to seriously consider, to build out models that work with their infrastructure. That's one of the things I tried to do in my article for Bitcoin Mag, was I took CalPERS and I said, what's realistic about what CalPERS is doing? And I found that CalPERS, they have a fund dedicated. It's a new fund. It's a trust that's simply there to fund unfunded liability payments to the pension. And for those listening that are kind of like, this is a complex thing, but imagine a fund has shortfalls where the amount of money that they take in and the performance of their portfolio does not keep pace with how much money they owe. Then imagine starting a second fund to say, okay, we're falling short on money we owe. So this fund, when we send you, the city of Long Beach or whatever, a bill that says, hey, I know you paid us this much $1 million for your employees that we pay a pension to. We now need more money from you because we're falling behind. Well, when that happens, the city has to go, okay, you need more money. We either have the money, or we're going to close libraries, or we're going to close a school down. I don't know what we're going to do, or we won't clean the streets this day. They started another fund, which is optional, to simply pay the unfunded liabilities. So I came in and said, well, why not include Bitcoin in that fund? Does it make sense if a system is failing to build a emergency system rooted in the same foundational infrastructure as the system that's failing? I say no. Logically, no, it doesn't. Why not build a backup system based on Bitcoin, make small allocations, and allow these cities and allow different organizations to have something else with the purpose of continuing to support their main retirement system? That way, it's not subject to the same failures that you would see in the traditional system. I don't think that's too like mind-blowing of a stretch or crazy of an idea, but that's one area where I've learned, like, I have to build a solution. I can't just sit there and say buy Bitcoin. That
Right.
I haven't been able to get traction on that yet, but I think that's I'd love to engage in a debate on why that's a bad idea.
What's the percent allocation you're aiming at when you're talking to them? Like, what are you like? Hey, is it 1%? Is it 5%? Like, what are you trying to hit them with? Like, hey, we're not telling you to go all into Bitcoin. What are you? What's your aim there with them?
I think, it depends on how they're going to do it. If I was able to sit down with like a large pension fund, looking at areas maybe where they can easily exit and reallocate, that's going to be a key determinant. If it's a system outside of the system, I think that warrants for a larger allocation. So if I was managing, let's just say for sake of conversation, $1 million pension fund, and we're not able to keep up with the payments, and so I go, okay, I need to start another fund now for the participants. But that fund is not going to be rooted in our main system. There's maybe that could be 100% allocation if it's a separate system, but not be a lot of money to where it would be a risk, or maybe it'd be a mixture. There's a lot more room when you have an ancillary infrastructure to allocate. If you're talking about the bulk of the fund, well, then you have to talk about the volatility of Bitcoin and how can you structure your allocation to weather that volatility. Because time has told us if you can weather the volatility, that the chart is just up from when Bitcoin was released. And so that those are all key factors. But we've really looked at like the 1 to 3%, not of an entire portfolio, but of a certain maybe area of a portfolio that can absorb that. And I think knowing what we know about Bitcoin, that's going to serve a pension very, very well. And how that supports. I think the first pension that does this, they're going to be in such a good spot that people are like, what'd you guys do? Like, hey, we're getting killed by commercial real estate right now. We're getting killed on private equity. What did you guys
bond
do?
market.
We did. We took this, and this, which were trouble areas. We had a good position and we went 2% Bitcoin. And now 10 years later, gosh, we're quite relaxed here at the office where we kind of oversee the funds. How are you guys doing?
What didn't Houston jump in? Who's doing it? Who right now is like, hey, I know people have maybe announced over the last few years, but who is actively doing it? I thought the Houston firefighters were, but what's kind of the word on some of that?
Yeah, Houston firefighters in 2021, they the managers of the pension funds, which weren't the firefighters, they're the fiduciary agents of the pension. They made an allocation. It wasn't massive, but it was significant to Bitcoin. I think they got Ethereum and other tokens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was all custody. They didn't have self-custody. They did it though through that. This was at the top, so I don't know if they ended up selling, if they've been able to weather the bear. I'm kind of interested in connecting with them and in talks with just seeing how they're doing. A lot of pension funds do have indirect exposure. CalPERS, for example, they picked up a very small shares of Riot and they made a profit on that, but then they cashed out. They also own MicroStrategy, so they have exposure in that sense. But as far as direct exposure, Houston was the only large pension fund that I know that picked up actual potential spot digital assets at size. I don't know what the allocation was. I just know it was at the top. And this was kind of a source of confusion when I worked with the firefighters in Santa Monica to be the first union to self-custody Bitcoin. Some people were like, no, that's not true. Houston was the first to get in, to which I pointed out, which was very clearly stated, they didn't self-custody their Bitcoin. And that, again, I think starting from self-custody, it's much more difficult for organizations and big institutions to do. But if you can do it, you accelerate your learning and cut back on your mistakes by paying drastically.
Yeah. Boy, all right. Shifting gears here a little bit. What was your introduction to money? Even growing up as a kid, becoming a firefighter. What was the story of you? I would love for you to kind of go through like what led you to the path that you're on now. What led you to here today? I mean, like what, our path crossing, all of us Bitcoiners, I love hearing the stories of kind of getting orange pilled and introduction to money, I guess, separately from Bitcoin itself. But what was, it's one of the first recollections as a kid, seeing money or being intrigued and then leading to Bitcoin. Because I think every Bitcoiner has that story of like, they are thinking about money as obviously something there, and then they find Bitcoin and like, oh wow, and just kind of blows their mind. What was that story for you?
I think yeah, condensing my money story, young, I came from working class parents, grew up in Oakland in the Bay Area, San Francisco. They worked really hard, of course, and tried to provide me with things they didn't have. Definitely had means growing up. So, but money was something that you knew about. I think, just at the most basic level is haves and have nots, people having stuff you don't have. Hey, here's a funny story. Not that this is the first thing of money, but I remember my pops I always was asking him to buy me like a new pair of shoes, especially when basketball shoes became really popular.
Yeah.
And he'd always be like, nah, you're not getting any shoes, And so when the Jordan 1s and the Reebok pumps came out, I was like, hey, I need these shoes. And he's like, well, there's no way you're getting both shoes, but I'll let you pick one of these. Now I picked the Reebok pumps. This was a mistake. And that's one of my earliest experiences of like not picking the right brand. The pumps are still sick. They came back, but Jordan 1s, dude, the Jordan 1s were like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Investment wise. Right.
Exactly. Traditional school system, not educated much at all on money. And my folks by no means had a financial background, so didn't have, huge education from them, on like the rich dad, poor dad type thing.
Yep.
Getting hired, finally finding a job where I had means, and that's like being able to, everyone has that kind of experience where you go, wow, like I could just go to, some country and go on a trip right now. Like, wow, so that was a moment for me. I always joke around when I got hired by the firefighters, it was on the precipice of the financial crisis. Now, when you're young and you're 25, 30 to me is as far away as like, flying cars. Like it's forget about it. Right. So I missed that whole thing. And people were always eager to be like, let me tell you, there's always some people that were like, let me tell you about, you have an opportunity to get a house right now. Like, this is crazy, this housing crisis and all this. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. I spend the check as quick as I get it. I really don't care. You start getting older and then I go, okay, you know what? I got to start like being savvy for the future. The job of a firefighter is one that it takes a toll on you physically. And some people commit their entire lives and they die early. So it's a big sacrifice, but you do get a good retirement. But thinking like, this is a lot to think about, right? What we trading time for money. So obviously I have a quick story for you. This is actually my first Bitcoin story. So I was like, I got to start getting in the stock market. So I did some like research myself and I bought like, I don't know, like $2,000 worth of Sprint stock because I was reading all about Sprint, right? Like Sprint, they're going to have a comeback and this and that. I walk out of my room and my roommate, he goes, hey, dude, what are you all grinning about? And I'm like, dude, I just hit it, dude. I just got 2,000 to Sprint. Like, I'm done, bro, retired. This thing's going to like the moon, And he goes, this was in like 2011, maybe. He goes, hey, you want some advice? And I go, yeah, what is it? He goes, take that Sprint stock, sell it, and buy this thing called Bitcoin. And I go, what is that? And he goes, I can't even explain it to you. He's an attorney, super sharp guy. He's like, dude, I don't even know what it is. I just know I'm seeing it in all these forums right now. And like people are going nuts. And I go, are you getting it? And he goes, no, of course not. Like I'm basically drowning in like law school. If I had money, I would. And I go, nah, I'm not interested either on that. Like if you're not getting it, I'm not going to take advice from you, and you're not even going in on some crazy thing that you don't even understand. Wow. That was a miss. That it was, I think at the time, he was telling me it was $10 a coin. So we'll call that a miss right there. But the Bitcoin, coming to Bitcoin and where finding Bitcoin first in 2016, 2017, and then really finding the active part much later. That's been really pivotal in shaping my perception of money, how it works. And I owe all of that to Bitcoin without a doubt. That's undebatable. And I think that Bitcoin has done that for a lot of people.
Yeah, my story is very similar to that in a way that it's, I thought the 08 crash, like you just said, that really woke me up, was graduating from Michigan State and just like, wow, there's a game being played. I got to figure out this money thing because they're playing us, and led you down the road to gold and silver and real estate and all these things, and did that for years. And then, you get to Bitcoin, like you said, same kind of time, like 2017, you kind of see it. I started buying in 2018 as an investor. I was like, okay, I'm going to wait till it goes down. And then I started buying in 2018 when it started coming down. And I learned so much more over the last 5 years than I did the first 5-10 years of studying monetary history and all that. Bitcoin, for whatever reason, it's hard to explain. It just sends you down these rabbit holes of learning. And we're learning about, I mean, as a Bitcoin, right? You're learning about Africa and you're learning about mining and all this energy. And I'm like, I thought I'd never use this lingo again in my life. I'm like, all right, school's done. Don't need to learn any of this stuff. And we're over here like learning about all these countries of the world and what's going on in their governments. And it's just like wild. In saying that, what's your favorite part about Bitcoin? Because you could take this anywhere. Is it the people? Is it the social layer? Is it the memes, the jokes? Is it like the love of like, oh, people are into, again, energy and mining and like seeing what's going on all around the world and what Bitcoin does to you? What's your favorite part about all of it, really?
So super tough question for a Bitcoiner, right? My favorite part, because there's endless things that I love. I would say the people that I've met are of high quality. That's definitely one of my favorite parts. I think my favorite part about Bitcoin is this, and for the listeners, I think this is important. It's that there is someone right now that exists who has zero knowledge of Bitcoin, or doesn't quite understand it fully. Maybe they just know the name, that will learn about Bitcoin and change Bitcoin, not change Bitcoin, but will build something that promotes and supports Bitcoin in a way that we haven't thought of. And that to me is the most exciting part, is that there can be someone right now, maybe there's someone too that isn't even born yet, and they're going to do something in Bitcoin that will revolutionize the way we know and use it. Not change it, because that's one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin is that like it's there, it's strong, it's rock solid, its values are intact, its protocol is intact and supported. And I say that because we talk about finding Bitcoin at certain points. In 2011, that my roommate said that thing to me. In 2017, ironically, I found it. Then for multiple years afterwards, I thought I missed it. And it's ironic that later, even as the price has gone up, I don't feel I've missed it, which is counterintuitive, because you would think,
right,
how is it that that's something I thought I missed it at a low price, and then as the price goes up, I don't feel like I missed it anymore. And that is because in learning about Bitcoin and the network and the protocol, I've come to learn the true promise of what it is, and therefore I haven't missed it. And I say that to the listeners because it's very easy for us to enter the space or go, gosh, I'll never be at the level of like a sailor, or I'll never be at the level of, some of these Bitcoin OGs or some of these developers. And that's true in many aspects. That doesn't mean that you can't do something to support, I would say not support Bitcoin, but support people who need Bitcoin. And in my situation, seeing what I'm seeing now, being able to support workers who rely on pensions, who rely on wages to support their families and their hard work, like that's my zone. And I'm gonna hit that with everything I have and use my knowledge there and try to like we started the show with, show people what I've seen to make their own minds up themselves.
Yeah, man, it's such a great point, Dom. Honestly, like one of the things I say to people too, and it goes back to the education thing. You can't just, like you said with the pensions, you can't just like, oh, hey, just buy Bitcoin and then set it and forget it and like leave, then go on. And it's the education process. Price is the least interesting aspect of Bitcoin. Like the more you learn about Bitcoin, like what you said, and it's something that strikes a chord with me because I'm always saying it to people. It's a savings technology. It's what it's going to do for humanity is what's the most amazing thing for it, not the price itself. That's an old system. You're measuring it in the wrong system. You can't even it's hard to explain, right? So it's not, the price is the least interesting aspect. I love that you said that. And then the other thing was like humbling. Bitcoin, changes you, but it humbles you. And we've heard that a lot, seen that a lot over the years with Bitcoin. And, there's many of us 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you think about where we think Bitcoin will go. Many of us, most of us probably in the space now will be gone and forgotten. Like we're doing our part here now to push it forward. But like you said, there's people that are born, now they're born 10 years ago, or it could be huge people. It could be a Tom Brady. It could be like a huge person. These people get into Bitcoin eventually, and then we just get drowned out in a way. And that's fine. That's totally fine. We're here to serve a mission. But I think about that a lot too, where it's like, man, like we might not be around. That's like, enjoy it. Like the Pacific Bitcoin in a few weeks. I can't wait to see you and so many people. And it's like, enjoy it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, enjoy it. Cause like 10 years now, 15 years now, we're probably not having these conferences, like we're not going to have, like, we're just gonna be living our life, like doing our thing in our citadels or whatever, it's like, we're not going to be like, oh, I'm at a Bitcoin conference. So I love that you said that, because it's going to be a very different world, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So anyhow, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's spot on. And I also really, one of the things we've talked about a lot is I enjoy the history around it too. I'm finding more and more that I love. I just got the book from Phil Champagne, which I've read most of Satoshi's emails, but I'm curious to see his perspective on the emails. I love the history around it, and I know we talk about that a lot. So we're seeing history in real time right now, and it's fun to learn about the history to get a better understanding about things. That's another area that I really encourage people to look at and understand.
That's interesting. And you'll have to send me the link for that too, because I got to get that. That's really cool. And in saying that, the next thing I was going to ask you, which this segues perfectly into it, is who or what do you study the most? So you kind of talked about the history, which is awesome. I love that part. Like I find myself getting into more of the mining stuff, some of the energy, the geopolitical aspects of it. Is it, you're studying, Lavish's, the Informationist? Is it Lynn Alden's, newsletter? Is it that stuff, the history, Satoshi's emails? What are some of the things that you find the most benefit from, or even have in the past? I mean, because as Bitcoiners, we kind of know, we go down these rabbit holes, like, oh, for like a couple months, I'm doing this thing. And then you kind of like, okay, like got it. Like now on to the next thing. What are some of the things you've kind of gone through and you're learning, and then are segueing or look forward to in the future learning about?
Yeah. So I love, starting with like the Bitcoin Standard, books like that on the macro. I have so much, like, I need to read more, and I encourage everyone. We get caught up on Twitter, and I'm trust me, I'm
guilty, right?
I am guilty, and I love talking about it and learning through talking about it with people. But there is so much good content out there in the form of like well-written books with good sources. So I need to do more on that. I find myself much more interested in, I love the macro stuff, but I also find myself much more interested in the history of Bitcoin, and then interested in trying to understand the way that the Bitcoin infrastructure works, whether that's mining, protocol, nodes, etc. So I'm really drawn to that at this time. I'm a huge believer, we talk about macro stuff, that like having this belief in Bitcoin, it's on us to build out the better system. And we get, I'll say that, and then in the next breath, I'll be like, I'm on Twitter because the Bitcoin ETF's going to hit, and I'm so excited, but me, and this is going to do so much for Bitcoin. But in reality, I don't want to wait for the legacy system to support it in any way. I don't know what's going to happen there is going to happen. I just want to provide good education and build out the better system. So I'm reading anything. I also find reading history in general, I look at it with a Bitcoin lens. So I encourage people to read. I was reading this book about events leading up to the Civil War. We know there's a lot of like parallels going on. I'm a huge fan. One of the things I included in one of my articles was studying the Japanese and the samurai. And I draw a huge parallel, and I talked about this in high hash rate, and basically the Japanese were very isolationist. And the samurai were like the elite warriors, right, of Japan. They ended up discovering the Gatling gun when it was pointed at them. That's when they first learned about the Gatling gun. They didn't get to read articles about it. They didn't get to get a little sneak preview. They were on horseback going towards a Gatling gun, which made them immediately basically, hey, your services are no longer needed. Now you're just
Obsolete. Yep.
Obsolete luxury.
Yep.
For the workers, Bitcoin is going to be the foundational cornerstone in so many other systems. I believe that. What that means is if you're a worker right now, you can read about and you can learn about that huge piece of the future that maybe who knows what other things built around that may come to replace you. We talk a lot about AI and different workers that may get replaced by AI. But from a negotiation standpoint, if you can own the building blocks of that future, you are in a much better spot, both personally and for other workers that you're trying to help. And that's like the key piece of everything that I'm trying to do is I'm sitting there trying to be like, look, read about this thing that is going to be pointed at you. And I'm not saying Bitcoin is going to be pointed against workers, but I think Bitcoin will be a foundation.
What's the fiat
on
system being pointed against you? Yeah.
Exactly. And they will be able to own a piece of that which replaces the inferior system. And imagine what that looks like. You know, you mentioned BJ, but like, you know, there's this huge thing with automated truckers and all that stuff. Well, there's a ways out from that, but imagine when the fleet comes and they say, yeah, we have a whole automated fleet that's here. And you go, that's awesome. We own the system on which that's built and runs. So let's talk shop. What do you guys want to do? Because, you know, we own the thing that you rely on as well. So I think it's really huge to also read about different things in history with a Bitcoin lens, in addition to books about Bitcoin.
Again, I love that you said that too, because that's one of my favorite things of like Jim Rogers, you know, one of the great commodity traders, macro guys, right, of all time. And over the last, 80 years. And he, he says, like, if you want to be a great investor, you got to know history and philosophy, so you have to understand those two things, and then things start to make a lot more sense. And so I just, like, you struck a nerve again with that, because that's one of my favorite quotes from Jim Rogers. So I know we're getting towards the end here a little bit. What, how does surfing...
I didn't get any hockey stories, dude.
You made me think of a hockey story earlier, and I can't remember what it was now. Gosh, I'll have to think of it. You made me think of something you were saying earlier. You mentioned something. I was like, oh, I got a little one there. Speaking of like hockey, that type of stuff, surfing, where does surfing play into this? So I know, like, we've been trying to, like you said, for a while, we've been trying to get together, do this. And, if we catch each other on spaces, whether it's the political Bitcoin hour or Bitcoin trading card space, or whatever it is, or it's a cafe Bitcoin, you're always like going to or from the surf a lot of times. So hit me with a little bit of the surf and what's going on there.
I love surfing. For me, it's been like I can't live without it. I find it very interesting that a lot of circular economies with Bitcoin are built in, near, or around surfing communities. Costa Rica, El Salvador. There's a lot
Bitcoin
of
Island,
different,
right? Yeah, there's a lot of different, yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with this kind of ocean culture and the rules of that whole like vibe, which is, take care of yourself, take care of others, be responsible, be a self custodian, be capable, let people live, there's a lot of similar values. And I know there's a lot of good surfers in the space who are working on stuff like this. I talked to John about this, John Snow, Chino,
Yep.
not Snow. And so, I think surfing there's a lot of, and Surfer Jim's brought up a lot of these too. There's a lot of parallels there. For me, what it means right now is I will go talk at any Bitcoin conference or meetup that is around a surf area, because that's one of the things that got me to El Salvador. I was like, wait, I get to go surf at one of the premier surf spots in the world and learn about a Bitcoin experiment that's happening in real time. And I can go experience those two together. Like, for me, I'm like, whoa, like that's nuts. So I'm going to be talking at Bitcoin Freedom Fest in January at Costa Rica. I'm going back to El Salvador for adopting Bitcoin, and surfing for me is very, in addition to drawing me to a lot of these places, I think there's a lot of great parallels, and surfing teaches you a lot about yourself and respect for the ocean, about energy, the transfer of energy. There's so much there to kind of
Yeah, it's wild.
oh dude, it's nuts.
I remember
we're gonna have to get you out for Pacific, bro, because we from the lake to the ocean, dude.
I told Corey, I was like, I think it was last year. I was like, you guys got to get a roller hockey tournament. We used to have 20 years ago, I had the Pro Beach hockey you guys had there in, I think Orange County or somewhere around there, on ESPN. It was ESPN, for crying out loud, like late 90s, early 2000s. And I was like, you guys got to get the Pro Beach hockey going. Like, let's get a game going. There's a bunch of hockey players, Lavish, there's a bunch of people. So it's like, let's go. Let's get a game going. But, not a lot of hockey players.
That would be rad. I think they used to do some in Santa Monica at the parking lot down by the beach. They used to have
you know what, that might have been there. Yeah that might be where it was.
We got to get you in that, and we got to get you out for the surf, because the surf is like,
that's wild, man. That's wild. That's why I like lakes. I'm from Michigan. I like lakes. I was like,
you know what? Surfer Jim brought this up. The ocean can be scary at first, until you start to learn and like move with the ocean. I always encourage people who starting out surfing, don't take a board out to start. Take out a pair of fins and learn how to swim in the ocean before you try to surf waves. Like learn how the ocean moves. Like, and there's a lot of parallels with that with Bitcoin too, right? If you're jumping in, don't get hurt. No one, like, you wouldn't go surf Mavericks your first time.
Right.
So would you allocate 50% of your net worth to something you don't even understand whatsoever? Get in there, play with the self-custody, learn, like, move, learn about like how things flow, how to move with the system, and takeaways and hazards and learning lessons from other people. And then you work your way up to a big wave like Mavericks and stuff like that. So that's another great parallel with surfing and Bitcoin. Is like, yeah, you don't go to the big leagues. You start off small and learning about the system.
Yeah, that's a great point. You mentioned a little bit some of the events and stuff. Is adopting Bitcoin, that's different than the having party, correct? That's are you doing okay? Yeah, are you going to the having party? What are you a Pacific Bitcoin? What are your what's your schedule here the next 6-9 months?
A lot of travel. If I can make the having party, I know that thing's going to be nuts. So I would love to go, but I know, I got El Salvador, Costa Rica, and so looking at if I can make that, that'd be awesome. Adopting again is going to be in San Salvador, and then I'm doing hitting the beach afterwards.
Yeah,
I'm actually crazy. It's been super amazing. I'm going to get looking to get 10 or 15 firefighters from San Salvador to come to my talk at Adopting, which is going to be really cool, because I'm going to focus a lot on what I did with the firefighters and how and why and things like that. And Sandy was really helpful in that. Sandy Waves on Twitter. She's like a tour guide out in El Salvador. She helped me get in touch with a fire captain down there. So yeah. And then I may also, there may be some local elected folks, which ties into, I know we have this could be a whole nother episode, but with the political stuff, what you do at the political spaces, that's another intersection for us, is how to approach elected officials. Should Bitcoin get involved in politics? How? There's a lot of stuff which we may have to do another episode. I know, bro.
That's a whole different. Yeah, we should for sure in the next month or two or whatever, because that is a really dicey subject, and a lot of Bitcoiners are split. It's 50-50, like people, and they're very passionate about that. So yeah, that's
but
really
I love what you're doing on that space. I think it's a good conversation. We have to talk about it and sort things out, because decisions, like you always say on the show, decisions get made. And if you're not at the table, Bitcoin's going to be fine. But if you're building a Bitcoin company that's supporting adoption, and then there's a government, law that really makes it impossible for you, that sucks no matter what. It just sucks. So if we can avoid that, great.
Yeah, it's reality. It's such a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the line I'm always saying. It's like, we want to minimize the collateral damage. Like you said, it's inevitable. Like, it will happen, but we want to minimize the garbage that happens between now and whenever that is, 5 years from now or 20 years from now, whatever it is. We want to shorten that window and minimize collateral damage. Because it's like you said, if we're not involved, things are getting done. People are doing things with or without you. So you better be at the table making your voice heard. And I think that's the thing that libertarians, Bitcoiners just tend to kind of miss sometimes. And it's not that they haven't thought about it necessarily, or, maybe some have, some haven't, but boy, is it important. Really quick too on the, is I was going to ask kind of what you're working on now. And I got the Nakamoto portfolio, obviously some of the events and stuff like that. What's got you fired up? But the Santa Monica, you're doing stuff with the firefighters there, correct? I know you've had some wins with just kind of in the area with that, correct? The firefighters in Santa Monica, I believe.
Yeah. So the work, basically in identifying an opportunity to be the first organization to self-custody Bitcoin, the Santa Monica firefighters did that. I helped them do that in work with the help of the board, the membership, like it was a team thing. All I did was kind of just say, here's some things I have available. All credit goes to them for sure. That led to me, though, I started a nonprofit called Proof of Workforce, which is this kind of concept of bringing Bitcoin to workers, unions, organizations, even businesses, and to the workplace, helping on the other end. Helping on that other end. So that's a 501c4 nonprofit. It's operational right now, building things out. We've had some great success. We also worked with the Chamber of Commerce to build a Bitcoin only committee ahead of Pacific, which is cool. They're doing good stuff there. So we're doing everything we can. We won the a tier 3 grant from Geyser in that little contest. So big shout out to Geyser for that was awesome. Our first ever contribution. It was a low dollar contribution, but you know what I mean? Like it's symbolic, right? So it's very motivating. So doing things along that front, and for any workers out there or unions or organizations, what we do is provide no cost education and help with adoption. So if you hit me up and you're a union and you want to set up a node, I'm going to use all my contacts and the best resources I have to help you do that at no cost. There's, whether it's adopting to put it on your balance sheet, I'm here to help at no cost. And I'm working now with unions across the country throughout to kind of look at ways to do that. So that's got me super fired up right now.
So cool. So cool. That kind of answers that last thing there. That's beautiful stuff. I want to link to that, a couple of those things we've talked about, obviously, in that stuff there as well. The Geyser stuff. I mean, the Geyser's awesome. We have them in Bitcoin trading cards. They're in one of our resource cards, and we talked about what you're doing in getting the first responders into Bitcoin trading cards as well. So I know in the coming months, next week, I know we can talk about that a little bit more with Aladdin stuff, which will be awesome to get that. We've had some military stuff. We've got some surprises for the commemorative packs for Pacific Bitcoin next week coming out that people will see. And but we need some first responders in there. So it'll be really cool to work with you, and look forward to that. That'll be awesome. So people can see that in the coming months here, and as we work on that. Any last words of advice, wisdom at all, and where can people find you?
Words of wisdom, shoot, I need those more than I should be dishing them out. But I would just say for everyone, stay positive, never stop learning, keep finding ways to build. And if you are trying to find your path in Bitcoin, don't worry, it's gonna show, and everyone has something to contribute in their own area, whether it's their home church or their home organization, they can bring Bitcoin and help that group of people. For finding me, the Twitter handle Baywatch1, the nickname is for another day. We'll talk about that, how that happened and how I got that name. That's spelled BEI, Watch One. And then the Proof of Workforce has a Twitter now called it's Workforce BTC. So you can find us there. We need more followers. We need more support. And then proofofworkforce.org is our website. Again, any workers, if you know anyone that's a worker, wants to bring Bitcoin to their workplace, things like getting paid in Bitcoin, things like running a node at their workplace, anything like that, get in touch. Any support, we can always use support. That's all. That's what we're focused on doing, is bringing Bitcoin to those groups. Don't be afraid. I get so many people that have reached out to me that's like, hey, I've always wanted to bring Bitcoin to like my union or something, but like they're just gonna they're gonna dismiss me and they're not gonna be into it. Don't worry. Like I'll go talk with your group. We'll bring good resources. Take that swing. Make a try. Don't worry. Only good things can happen when you try and put in work. So looking forward to work with everyone, yourself included, and all the great things you're working on. And huge fan, dude, and just grateful for being on.
Same, brother. Same. Much respect to you as well, man. It's very cool. You have a way of about you of like you don't get too high, too low, and it's something that it's a very needed in the Bitcoin space. Obviously, the politics, whether it's pensions, it's Bitcoin, like all these different things, you have a very calming demeanor, and that's very important. So I know I'm grateful that you're in my corner of the ring, that's for sure. And as are many Bitcoiners, grateful that you're doing that work out there that most people can't do, and you have the demeanor to do it, not too high, not too low. So, man, just appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you in a little over a week from now. I cannot believe it's already that close, man. Pacific Bitcoin. And then you're off and you've got a lot more events, a lot more stuff going on here. And I'll hopefully catch you at some of those. And we'll link to all that stuff as well. So thank you so much, brother, for coming on, Dom. And we'll link to a bunch of this stuff and we'll get this out here probably before Pacific. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, bro. Looking forward, dude. We're going to have a good time.
Be a blast. Thanks, man.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I always feel like I learn so much from every single person that's on. And in Bitcoin, as we joked about in the episode, you learn so much. You've never in a million years thought, when I was leaving school, I never thought like, I'm going to be learning about African geopolitical situations and what's going on there. But Bitcoin takes you down those roads, takes you down learning about energy, learning about stranded energy and lost energy and African, sub-Saharan African economies of the nations there. It makes you think of things you never thought you'd think of. It makes you think of humanity as a whole. It removed me from the real estate I was doing for 10 years and doing quite well at, honestly, and said, I need to be fighting a bigger battle. I need to be playing a bigger game. As Jeff Booth says, the greatest game, is this fight against communism, against Marxism, against fiat, against central banks. That is the disease, and we need to rid ourselves of that old system and usher in this new equity-based, just, fair system of Bitcoin. So I hope you got something out of Dom and what he is doing, and you can see the person that he is and the people that are on the Bitcoin mission, the Bright Orange mission for the Bright Orange future, and the people that we have on our side, and the intelligence they have, and the true heart they have. So I hope you appreciated this episode and got something out of it. Please share it out, because the algorithm truly hates truth, cannot stand it. We are our own best defense against tyranny and creating our own freedom. So please share this out. Overwhelm the system with positivity, with a message of hope and inspiration, and question everything with boldness, even the existence of God himself. This is not financial advice. It is freedom advice. Trust but verify. We'll see you on the next one.